I want you to imagine yourself standing in the exact center of a massive crowd.
Oh, that is immediately stressful for a lot of people.
Right, like maybe you're at a music festival and you are just shoulder to shoulder with thousands of strangers. The air is literally vibrating against your chest from the
You
bass.
probably can't even see the stage through the sea of heads, yeah?
Exactly. Or maybe you're on a solemn religious pilgrimage. You're moving slowly under this baking sun, and you just feel like one microscopic drop in an ocean of millions of people.
All moving in the exact same direction.
Yeah, exactly. So take a second, if you're listening, to really put yourself in that space. When you're standing in the middle of that sheer crushing mass of humanity, what is your gut reaction?
Do you feel a sense of unity, or do you feel like total dread?
Right. Do you feel like you are just one wrong step or one sudden loud noise away from terrifying chaos?
Well, it's a deeply visceral thing, right?
Yeah.
Almost primal. Because for most people, the immediate hardwired instinct is just extreme vulnerability.
Oh, 100%.
Because human beings are biologically programmed to feel alarm when our personal space completely vanishes.
Like your bubble is just gone.
Exactly. When you are packed in that tightly, your physical agency, I mean, your ability to decide where your feet go and how fast you walk, it's suddenly handed over to the collective movement of the crowd.
Yeah, you aren't really walking anymore. You're just being carried by this current of bodies.
Right, and that is exactly the terror of it. You feel entirely stripped of control.
But, and this is why we are doing this deep dive today, we're going to unpack a stack of research that is going to fundamentally rewire how you look at those massive crowds.
It really shifts the entire paradigm.
It does. Because we need to look at a mass gathering not just as a random assortment of individual people who, happen to buy a ticket to the same field.
Or travel to the same river? Yeah.
Right. I want you to imagine that massive crowd as a living, breathing entity, like a temporary pop-up superorganism.
I love that analogy. It's so accurate to the data.
Because the research shows that, like any complex organism, a massive crowd actually develops its own distinct psychology. It develops a physical immune system.
And when things go wrong inside the body of that crowd, it has this desperate need for internal triage to keep itself from collapsing.
Exactly. And we're pulling from some incredible sources today to prove this. We've got a deep psychological study of a near disaster at a UK beach concert.
We're also looking at a massive World Health Organization-backed review on global mass gatherings medicine.
Right, and some cutting-edge research on how medical professionals actually triage patients when the entire system is just completely overwhelmed.
So that concept of the pop-up superorganism is actually the perfect lens for the data we're going to look at.
Where do we even start with an organism that big?
Well, to understand how it functions, you really have to start by looking at its brain. You have to understand the psychology of the swarm.
Okay, the swarm's brain.
Yeah, and to really observe that brain under extreme stress, we need to look at this incredibly revealing case study from July 13th, 2002.
Ugh, Brighton Beach in the UK.
Yes, the Big Beach Boutique, too.
This event is absolute legend in the music industry. So, to set the scene, organizers set up a free outdoor dance party right on the beach, featuring the DJ Fatboy Slim.
Right. And based on the turnout from the previous year, the city planners, the police, and the medical personnel, they all prepped the infrastructure for a crowd of roughly 65,000 people.
Which is a lot of people.
It is. It would have been a large but totally manageable event. They had their baseline assumptions for crowd control and exit routes all calibrated for that number.
But things didn't exactly go to plan, did they?
No, a perfect storm of variables completely shattered those assumptions. The event got heavy national promotion on BBC Radio 1 in the weeks leading up to it.
Okay, so massive hype.
Massive hype. And on the day of the event, the weather, which had been historically terrible that summer, it suddenly broke into this stunningly beautiful, warm, sunny day.
Oh, so everyone in the UK just decided to go to the beach.
Literally everyone. The result was that people just kept arriving. The trains were overflowing. The highways were totally jammed.
So instead of 65,000 people, how many showed up?
An estimated 250,000 people descended on Brighton Beach.
250,000 people.
Yeah.
And we aren't talking about a massive open grassy plain here. We are talking about a beach. There are hard physical boundaries.
Very rigid physical boundaries.
Hmm.
I mean, Brighton Beach is characterized by these large pebbles, and it's bordered by a heavy seawall and a promenade.
So you can't just spill over into a field.
Right, and there are limited staircases acting as choke points. By the time the music started, the beach was packed, absolutely shoulder to shoulder.
It sounds claustrophobic just thinking about it.
The sheer mass of humanity started spilling over the seawall onto the upper promenade roads, and it completely suffocated vehicle access.
So ambulances can't get in?
No. Emergency exit routes became physically impassable walls of human bodies. And to escalate the danger even further, the tide was coming in.
Wait, what? So the actual physical ground beneath this 250,000 people is literally shrinking by the minute.
Shrinking rapidly. It was forcing the entire mass to compress tighter and tighter against that seawall.
Oh.
People were actually climbing up the metal scaffolding of the lighting wigs just to escape the crush on the ground.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare scenario, like ready to snap at any second.
Officially, the city deemed it a near disaster.
I can see why.
But years later, a team of researchers led by Dr. John Drury conducted this deep, retrospective psychological analysis of the event.
Okay, and what did they find?
What they uncovered was a staggering psychological disconnect. They looked at the event through two completely different lenses.
Who are the two groups?
They looked at how the safety professionals experienced it, meaning the police, the paramedics, the event stewards, versus how the actual people inside the crowd experienced it.
I have to imagine the police officers looking out over an ocean of 250,000 people with the tide rolling in were preparing for the absolute worst-case scenario.
Oh, they were utterly terrified. The interviews with the professionals revealed this traumatic sense of helplessness.
Wow, really traumatic.
Yes, they reported a total systemic loss of control. And what is fascinating from a psychological standpoint is why they were so terrified.
Well, it seems obvious, right? There's too many people.
True, but the safety professionals were viewing the mass of people through the lens of what sociologists call disaster myths.
Disaster myths. What is that exactly?
It's this deeply ingrained framework that dates back to early crowd psychology theorists like Gustave Le Bon. It assumes that crowds are inherently irrational.
Ah, okay. So they assume the crowd is just a mob waiting to happen.
Exactly. The professionals looked at the beach and didn't see fans having fun. They saw a ticking time bomb of contagious disorder.
Contagious disorder, meaning they assume that if one person panics, the panic spreads like a virus.
Right, and suddenly you have a mindless, trampling herd.
Which is terrifying if you're a cop trying to manage it.
The police reports constantly invoked the imminent threat of mass panic. They cited the widespread drunkenness, the sheer density, and the property damage as proof that the crowd was fundamentally hostile and volatile.
So they felt they had to assert control immediately.
Operating under this disaster myth, the police felt their only recourse to prevent a massacre was the application of heavy external force.
What did they do?
They actually began deploying officers in full riot gear, preparing to try and physically carve order into the crowd.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you right there because
Okay.
something doesn't add up here.
What's that?
If you have 250,000 people backed into a corner by the ocean, right?
Mm.
And half of them are intoxicated, and the police have completely lost control of the infrastructure, why wasn't this a historic tragedy?
It's a great question.
Like, we've seen what happens when crowds compress. Look at the Astroworld Festival crush where the tragic crowd collapses in Seoul.
Right, in Itaewon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those crowds were there for entertainment too, and people died. Why didn't the Brighton Beach crowd turn into a lethal stampede?
That is the pivotal question, and it cuts right to the core of the psychological superorganism. The reason it didn't turn into a catastrophe is because the disaster myth is largely false.
The crowd didn't panic.
The crowd didn't panic. Astroworld and the Soul Crush were mechanical, physical tragedies.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning the crowd density became so extreme that fluid dynamics literally took over. People could not expand their lungs because of the physical force of the bodies around them.
Oh, God. So it's physics at that point, not psychology.
Exactly. Once a crush reaches that mechanical threshold, psychology doesn't matter, physics takes over. But before you reach that lethal physical threshold, behavior dictates everything.
Okay.
And at Brighton Beach, despite the extreme density, the crowd behaved in a way that actively prevented the mechanical crush from initiating.
Ow, what did they do?
They self-organized.
So while the police on the outside are putting on riot helmets preparing for a bloodbath, the people on the inside are, what? Just chilling out.
According to the survey data and the subsequent interviews, yes, the participants absolutely did not view themselves as a panic mob.
That is wild.
The overwhelming majority reported feeling incredibly safe.
Safe in that crush.
Let me give you a very clear example of how this behavioral self-regulation works in practice, because it contrasts perfectly with the police response.
Okay, let's hear it.
We mentioned earlier that people were climbing the metal lighting rigs to escape the density.
Right, which is incredibly dangerous. I mean, if that scaffolding tips over into a tightly packed crowd of 250,000 people, you have a mass casualty event instantly.
The police recognized that danger immediately, of course. Their instinct, driven by the assumption of a hostile, irrational crowd, was to send those riot gear-equipped officers wading into the mass of dancers.
To do what?
To forcefully pull the climbers down from the scaffolding.
Which sounds like tossing a lit match into a powder keg.
It really does.
If you send heavily armored police shoving their way into a claustrophobic, compressed crowd, you are going to trigger the exact panic and stampede you are trying to prevent.
Precisely. It would have introduced aggressive external force into a highly pressurized environment, but some of the local organizers understood the internal dynamics of this specific crowd much better than the riot police did.
Thank goodness. What was their solution?
Instead of using physical force, they utilized the DJ. They used what event planners call the voice of God.
Oh, right. The mic that cuts through everything.
Exactly. Fatboy Slim turned the music down, took the microphone, and spoke directly to the crowd. He didn't yell or threaten. He just explained that the party simply couldn't continue for anyone's safety until the person on the rig came down.
And what did he want them to do about it?
He asked the crowd to handle it.
That is a massive gamble. You are essentially asking 250,000 partying drunk people to self-police.
It was a huge gamble, but it paid off instantly. The DJ leveraged the crowd against the individual. The entire mass of people surrounding the lighting rig turned their attention to the climber and started chanting for him to come down.
Wow. So just massive, instantaneous peer pressure.
Exactly. And it worked. The climber slid down safely, the crowd erupted in cheers, the music kicked back in. And here is the most important part.
What's that?
Absolutely no one else climbed a lighting rig for the rest of the entire night.
That's incredible.
The crowd established a brand new safety norm on the fly, and they enforced it themselves.
So they basically created their own behavioral immune system in real time.
Yes, exactly.
But why does that happen? What is the actual mechanism inside the human brain that makes a drunk, claustrophobic person at a concert decide to look out for a stranger, instead of just shoving them out of the way to get more breathing room?
It's a phenomenon known in psychology as the social identity model of collective resilience.
Okay, social identity model of collective resilience. Break that down for me.
This is the psychological shift that turns a group of individuals into a superorganism. When you enter a massive crowd that is gathered for a shared purpose, you undergo a cognitive transition.
Okay, so your brain literally switches modes.
Right. You shed your personal identity, the part of your brain that says, I need to protect my space, I need to get to the front, I need to look out for myself.
And you replace it with what?
You adopt a collective identity. Your internal monologue shifts from I to we.
We are all here for the music. We are all dealing with this incoming tide together.
Exactly. And that shift is not just some warm, fuzzy feeling. It triggers profound social relational transformations in how your brain processes the people around you.
So?
Well, when you view the strangers pressing against your shoulders as part of your we, your baseline level of trust skyrockets.
Because they aren't competitors anymore. They're part of your group.
Right. You suddenly develop high expectations of support from the crowd and a massive willingness to provide support in return.
That's fascinating.
The researchers actually ran statistical modeling on the survey responses from Brighton Beach, and the correlation was undeniable. Identifying strongly with the crowd was the single biggest predictor of feeling safe during the event.
Because you know the organism won't let you fall.
Exactly.
You know, I remember reading one specific anecdote in the qualitative interviews from the source material that perfectly encapsulates this.
Oh, which one?
There was a young woman who completely fainted from exhaustion during the incredibly slow, tightly packed evacuation off the beach.
Right, the bottleneck at the stairs.
Yeah. Now, under the disaster myth in a panicked herd, a fainted person is an obstacle. Right. They get stepped on. They get trampled.
That's what the police feared.
But that's not what happened here.
No, the collective resilience mechanism took over completely.
What did they do?
In a totally dense, slow-moving bottleneck, complete strangers immediately noticed her go down. They didn't push past her. They stopped, picked her up, and seamlessly coordinated with the people around them.
Just strangers communicating without words.
Yeah. They carried her above the crowd, physically passing her through the densely packed queue until they reached a medical safety zone. There was no screaming, no pushing, no panic.
It perfectly aligns with the metaphor. The external medical system, the ambulances, the police were completely cut off. They were paralyzed.
Right.
So the crowd's internal immune system recognized a vulnerable cell, surrounded it, and healed its own injury. The shared identity literally replaced panic with mutual aid.
It's amazing. That behavioral shield is incredibly powerful. It is the real reason humans can gather in the millions without tearing each other apart.
But a behavioral shield has its limits, right?
Well, absolutely.
Because the psychology of a crowd might keep you from getting trampled, and it might inspire the guy next to you to catch you if you faint. But your shared identity as a music fan or a pilgrim cannot protect you from what you are inhaling.
No, it cannot.
It can't protect you from the microscopic threats swimming in the water you're standing in.
Definitely not.
So if we zoom out from a spontaneous beach party in the UK and look at the largest planned multi-day human gatherings on Earth, the vulnerabilities of this superorganism change completely.
They do, because millions of people aren't just sharing an identity. They are breathing on each other, sweating on each other, and sharing fluids.
Which brings us to the terrifying biological reality of mass gatherings.
Yes. In epidemiological circles, this is often referred to as the Petri dish effect.
The Petri dish effect. That sounds ominous.
It is. When you bring millions of immune systems from different corners of the globe into one confined geographic location, the biological exchange is staggering.
And there is no greater example of this than the Kumbh Mela in India.
The scale of it is just unbelievable.
I have tried to wrap my head around the scale of the Kumbh Mela, and the numbers just break my brain. Can you explain to the listener what this event actually is physically?
Sure. The Kumbh Mela is a massive Hindu religious pilgrimage. It is held every 3 years, and it rotates between 4 different riverbank sites across India.
Okay, and how long does it last? Like a weekend?
No, it doesn't last for a few hours like a concert. It lasts for up to 2 months.
2 months?
Yeah. And in 2013, the gathering attracted an estimated 120 million pilgrims over its duration.
120 million people. Just to put that in perspective for you listening, that is roughly equivalent to taking a third of the entire population of the United States and having them all converge on a single riverbank over a period of a few weeks.
It's hard to even picture.
How do you even keep that many people alive? Where do they sleep? How do they drink?
Well, you have to build a city from scratch.
A city for 120 million people.
Yes. The regional organizers orchestrate one of the most astonishing feats of public health infrastructure and urban planning on the planet. They construct these massive pop-up cities along the floodplains.
What kind of infrastructure are we talking about?
To sustain that population, they lay down 550 kilometers of temporary water pipelines. They install over 45,000 temporary toilets. They build vast internal road networks, pontoon bridges to cross the rivers. They install a massive electrical grid and set up dedicated sector hospitals.
That's insane. It's an entirely functional metropolis that just appears out of the dust.
It sustains a population larger than most countries, and then it is entirely dismantled weeks later.
It is an absolute triumph of logistics. But despite all of that incredible infrastructure, there is a fundamental biological vulnerability built into the very DNA of the event, isn't there?
There is. Because the central purpose of this entire pop-up city is the water ritual.
Right, the mass bathing.
Yes. The spiritual core of the Kumbh Mela involves mass bathing in the holy rivers, primarily the Ganges or the Godavari, depending on the rotation.
And what's the significance of that for the pilgrims?
Pilgrims believe that immersing themselves in these sacred waters cleanses them of their sins and helps break the cycle of reincarnation. It is a profoundly beautiful, deeply spiritual moment for the participants.
But if we pull back and look at it strictly through the lens of a public health professional, the mechanics of the ritual are alarming.
Very alarming.
Because you have millions of people wading into a slow-moving river, submerging their heads, inevitably swallowing small amounts of water, and then thousands more stepping into that exact same water right behind them.
All day, every day, for weeks.
Right.
Exactly. The water becomes an unprecedented vector for biological exchange.
How bad does the water get?
The research indicates that during the peak days of the festival, the bacterial load in the river water increases by a staggering 130-fold.
130 times the normal amount of bacteria.
Yes.
And what does that actually do to the human body? Like when you have a medical tent set up in this pop-up city, what are the doctors actually seeing walk through the door?
Well, the immediate consequences are exactly what you would expect from massive waterborne exposure. Researchers closely tracked patient data across 30,000 pilgrims visiting 4 different sector hospitals, during the 2013 Kumbela.
And what was the biggest issue?
The most prominent spike they recorded was an explosion of non-bloody diarrhea,
Oof.
and the timing was mathematically precise. The surge in clinic visits for gastrointestinal illness peaked exactly 2 days after the primary mass bathing days.
Which is, let me guess, the exact incubation period for those specific waterborne bacteria to take hold in the human gut.
Precisely. It's clockwork.
Yeah.
But the water isn't the only vector.
What else is there?
Because the city is temporary, the infrastructure for cooking and heating is highly decentralized. Millions of pilgrims are relying on open fires fueled by cow dung or scavenged firewood to cook their meals and keep warm during the cold nights.
Oh, wow. So millions of small fires burning all at once.
Yes. And when you multiply the smoke from those small fires by millions, confined within incredibly dense tent cities, the air quality just plummets.
So you are compromising the respiratory system of the superorganism at the exact same time you're compromising the gut.
Severely. The dense, smoke-filled air, combined with the extreme physical proximity of the crowds, leads to massive outbreaks of acute respiratory infections.
Do we have numbers on that?
The data showed that more than 23% of all the patients seeking care at those clinics were coming in specifically for cough medicine and respiratory distress.
Okay, now a severe cough or a bout of diarrhea is awful if you're sleeping in a tent, sure.
Definitely.
But the public health community isn't in a global panic over stomach bugs, right? Where this gets genuinely terrifying is the research surrounding superbugs.
This is where it gets very serious.
The sources point out that the Kumbh Mela acts as an enormous mixing bowl, like an accelerator, for antimicrobial resistance, or AMR.
Yes, and this is arguably one of the most critical public health threats of the 21st century. We rely on antibiotics to survive basic surgeries and infections, but bacteria are constantly evolving to defeat our drugs.
Right, and mass gatherings speed that up.
Drastically. During the 2015 Kumbh Mela at the Godavari River site, researchers took water samples and discovered a 20-fold increase in the presence of a specific genetic marker called the BlandDM1 gene.
Okay, I want to make sure you listening really grasp how insidious this is. Let's break down what BlandDM1 actually does. How does a gene in a river make a human sick?
Well, BlandDM1 stands for New Delhi Metallo-beta-lactamase 1. It is not a bacteria itself. It is a gene, a piece of genetic code.
Okay.
And here's the scary part about bacteria. They can engage in something called horizontal gene transfer.
Horizontal gene transfer. What does that mean?
It means they don't just pass traits down to their offspring vertically. They can literally bump into a completely different species of bacteria in the environment, connect to it, and hand over a tiny circle of DNA called a plasmid.
So they just trade secrets.
Exactly. It is like two soldiers on a battlefield, swapping instruction manuals for a new kind of armor.
And the BlandDM1 gene is the blueprint for a nearly impenetrable suit of armor.
Exactly. The gene instructs the bacteria on how to produce an enzyme that actively destroys a massive broad range of antibiotics.
Which antibiotics? Like penicillin.
Even worse, it neutralizes carbapenems, which are the incredibly powerful last line of defense antibiotics we use in hospitals when literally everything else has failed.
Oh, wow. So if a bacteria has this gene, nothing works against it.
Right. When a bacteria acquires this gene, it becomes a superbug. It becomes practically invincible to our current medical arsenal.
And the river is just full of them.
The sheer density of human waste, environmental bacteria, and biological runoff in the bathing areas of the river creates the perfect highly concentrated soup for this genetic swapping to occur at hyperspeed.
So that's basically a superbug factory.
It is. The researchers at the 2015 event even discovered a completely novel, highly resistant bacterial species at the river site that had never been documented before.
A brand new one.
Yeah, they named it Corynebacterium guttivarianum.
Wow. So a pilgrim submerges themselves in the river, inevitably swallows a mouthful of water, and that invincible superbug, equipped with the new armor, sets up shop in their gut. But why does that matter globally? Like, if I am sitting in my apartment in New York or London, why should I care about a genetic mutation in a river in India?
You have to care because of the realities of modern globalization. The mass gathering is the incubator, but the jet plane is the delivery system. That pilgrim who ingested the superbug doesn't stay in India. Within 48 hours of the festival ending, they could be on an international flight landing at Heathrow or JFK.
Right. They go home.
A few weeks later, they develop a urinary tract infection or severe respiratory issue triggered by that specific superbug. They go to their local neighborhood hospital in London or New York.
And the doctors try to treat them?
The doctors prescribe standard antibiotics and they fail.
Yeah.
They prescribe the last resort antibiotics and they fail.
Oh, God.
Suddenly, an entirely novel, completely antibiotic-resistant strain of bacteria has been successfully transplanted from a riverbank in India directly into a new, totally distinct healthcare network on the other side of the planet.
It is the ultimate biological butterfly effect. One gathering seeds the entire globe.
It's a huge concern for the WHO.
Which leads us directly to the other massive gathering the WHO focuses on in the sources, the Hajj.
Yes, the Hajj is the annual Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia.
For those who might not know, what is the scale of the Hajj?
It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and it requires every physically and financially capable Muslim to perform it at least once in their lifetime. This brings together roughly 10 million pilgrims annually.
10 million, and they're coming from everywhere, right?
From over 180 different countries.
108 countries. It is quite literally the entire world funneling into a single city.
And the physical density required to complete the rituals, particularly the tawaf, where millions of pilgrims circle the Kaaba and the Grand Mosque, creates an unavoidable crucible for airborne pathogens.
So instead of waterborne, we are dealing with airborne.
Yes. It is so common that it has earned its own colloquial medical term, the pilgrim's cough.
The pilgrim's cough. So it is basically an accepted reality that if you go, you are going to catch a respiratory infection.
It is a statistical near certainty. You have millions of people, a significant percentage of whom are elderly or have pre-existing conditions, breathing the same recycled air in the tents and the same outdoor air in the dense crowds for days on end.
That's a recipe for disaster.
But the Saudi Ministry of Health isn't just worried about a nasty cold.
What are they worried about?
Because pilgrims are arriving from every corner of the globe, the Saudi government is forced to act as the world's frontline defensive shield against pathogens with massive epidemic potential.
Like what?
They are constantly screening the crowd for Middle East respiratory syndrome, so MERS-CoV, the Ebola virus, and tuberculosis.
I'm glad you brought up tuberculosis. The TB data in the source material is genuinely alarming.
It really is.
There was a specific screening study conducted during the 2015 Hajj. Researchers set up a protocol to randomly screen 11,164 pilgrims who had arrived from countries known to have high endemic rates of TB.
Right. And they didn't pick sick people, remember?
Exactly. They just pulled random people from the crowd for testing.
And the results were sobering.
What did they find?
Out of that random sample of 11,164 people, they identified 15 individuals who had completely undiagnosed active pulmonary tuberculosis.
Active pulmonary TB, which means it is not dormant in their system. The bacteria is actively eating away at their lungs.
Yes.
And every time they cough, every time they sing, every time they exhale into the crowd, they are spraying infectious aerosolized droplets directly into a densely packed mass of humanity.
It's a terrifying thought.
If we extrapolate that math, 15 people out of roughly 1,000 across a crowd of 10 million.
You are looking at the terrifying statistical probability of tens of thousands of people walking around the Grand Mosque actively exhaling one of the most deadly infectious diseases in human history.
So let me ask the obvious, blunt question here.
Okay.
If you were the World Health Organization and you were looking at the data, you know that a mass gathering in a river is going to accelerate invincible superbugs. You know that a mass gathering in Mecca is going to distribute active tuberculosis and novel respiratory viruses back to 180 countries.
Yeah.
How is it justifiable to let these events proceed?
It's a very fair question.
I mean, I remember the build-up to the 2016 Rio Olympics. The Zika virus was exploding in Brazil, people were terrified about birth defects, and there was a massive global pressure campaign demanding the WHO cancel or postpone the games.
I remember that clearly.
But the WHO refused. They said the cancellation wasn't justified. How can public health officials manage a risk of that absolute magnitude without just shutting the event down?
It is an incredibly complex ethical and logistical balancing act. The World Health Organization's philosophy, which they firmly applied to the Rio Olympics, is that in a hyper-connected world, canceling a specific event doesn't actually stop the global movement of disease.
Because people travel anyway.
Exactly. People are still traveling to and from Brazil for business and tourism, whether the Olympics happen or not. The WHO's stance is that the risk should not be managed by blanket cancellation, but rather by implementing hyper-advanced, localized public health defense systems.
So you don't stop the gathering, you heavily fortify the gathering.
Precisely. And they rely on 2 primary, highly evolved tools to do this: real-time syndromic surveillance and mandatory targeted vaccinations.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of those tools. What exactly is syndromic surveillance, and how does it differ from how a normal doctor's office operates?
Well, in a normal healthcare setting, you rely on lab results. A patient comes in with a fever, you swab them, send it to a lab, and 3 days later, you know they have the flu.
Simple enough.
But in a mass gathering of 10 million people, a 3-day delay means the virus has already infected 100,000 people. You cannot wait for the lab.
So what do they do?
Syndromic surveillance means you build an electronic dragnet that monitors symptoms in real time. During the Hajj, the Saudi Ministry of Health has implemented a fully automated, centralized electronic reporting system.
Okay.
Every single field clinic, every mobile medical unit, and every sector hospital inputs data instantly.
So they are watching the data flow like a livestock ticker.
Exactly. The command center is watching for algorithmic anomalies. If one clinic in the northern part of the tent city reports a patient with a sudden high fever and hemorrhagic symptoms, and 5 minutes later a different clinic a mile away reports the same exact symptom.
The system flags it instantly.
Yes. The command center sees the anomaly in real time, assumes the worst-case scenario, and deploys rapid response isolation protocols before the pathogen can take root in the broader crowd.
It is a biological early warning radar.
It's incredible technology.
And the second layer of the defense is the mandatory vaccination requirements.
Yes. And we have historical proof that this brute force approach works. Decades ago, the Hajj was repeatedly ravaged by massive deadly outbreaks of meningococcal meningitis. It was a recurring nightmare.
So what changed?
The Saudi government implemented an absolute non-negotiable policy. To even receive a visa to enter the country for the Hajj, a pilgrim must provide documented proof that they have received the quadrivalent meningococcal vaccine. There are no exceptions.
And what was the result? Did it work?
It was a total, unmitigated public health victory. Since that strict mandate was heavily enforced, there have been 0 major meningitis outbreaks associated with the Hajj.
Wow.
By forcing the population to artificially boost their immune systems before they even board the plane, they neutralized the threat entirely.
So we have a pretty comprehensive picture of the macro defenses now.
You do.
We know that the psychological shift of the crowd acts as a behavioral immune system, stopping the superorganism from physically crushing itself in a panic.
Right.
And we know that the global health authorities are acting as the macrobiological immune system, using syndromic surveillance and vaccines to stop the superorganism from seeding a global pandemic.
Exactly.
But let's zoom all the way back down to the mud and the dirt of the actual event.
Okay, let's go.
Because regardless of the psychology or the vaccines, in a crowd of 250,000 people, individual bodies are going to break.
Absolutely. The sheer law of large numbers guarantees it.
People are going to severely dehydrate. They are going to take a synthetic drug that stops their heart. They are going to slip on a rock and snap an ankle.
All the above.
When those individual failures happen and the tiny medical tent behind the main stage suddenly gets flooded with hundreds of people at the exact same time, how do the medics on the ground decide who lives, who waits in agony, and who just gets a bottle of water and a pat on the back?
This brings us to the most chaotic, stressful environment imaginable, and the logistical evolution of triage. Yes, triage is a French military term that simply means to sort. It is the brutal but necessary process of prioritizing patient care based on the severity of their condition when your medical resources are overwhelmingly insufficient for everyone to be treated immediately.
The sources outline 2 completely different types of triage. Parallel triage and serial triage. What is the distinction there?
Serial triage is what you experience on a normal Tuesday at your local hospital's emergency room. Patients arrive one at a time, serially.
You take a number.
Right. The triage nurse assesses you, looks at the queue of people already sitting in the waiting room, and decides where you fit in the line.
And parallel triage.
Parallel triage is what happens in the field during a mass casualty event or a massive festival surge. You don't have a neat line of people. You have 50 patients scattered across the grass in front of you simultaneously.
All needing help at once.
Exactly. The medical provider has to rapidly scan the entire group in parallel, moving from body to body in seconds to identify who is crashing right now and who can wait an hour.
But the systems the paramedics are trained to use for that parallel triage, they weren't designed for a music festival with a bunch of dehydrated teenagers, were they?
No, they were not. And this is a massive problem. The traditional pre-hospital triage systems that most paramedics are trained on, but the extremely common START system.
What does START stand for?
It stands for Simple Triage and Rapid Treatment. These systems were born in the mud and blood of military warfare and major industrial disasters like train derailments.
Okay, so battlefield medicine.
Right. They are engineered almost exclusively to assess trauma. They rely on very fast, crude assessments of physiology.
Like what?
Is the patient breathing? Is their heart racing? Can they follow a simple command? Or they rely on the visible mechanism of injury. Is there a massive laceration, a gunshot wound, or a crushed limb?
Which makes sense if a bomb goes off, absolutely.
Definitely.
But if we go back to our superorganism metaphor, using a military trauma system to assess a music festival crowd is like an immune system that only knows how to fight a knife wound, trying to figure out how to fight a poison.
That's a great way to put it.
It is completely blind to the actual threats. Think about the reality of a modern music festival. A kid comes into the medical tent having taken a heavy dose of a recreational drug, say a synthetic cathinone or MDMA laced with something else.
Very common scenario.
When they first stumble into the tent, they might be talking, breathing fine, and their heart rate might be slightly elevated, but not critical.
Exactly. And under the strict rules of a military trauma triage system like START, the triage nurse looks at that patient, sees no bleeding, sees stable initial vitals, and assigns them a green tag,
Green meaning what?
meaning minor delayed care. They tell them to go sit in the corner of the tent and wait.
But chemically, that kid's body is a ticking time bomb.
It is.
5 minutes later, the delayed reaction hits. Their core temperature spikes to 106 degrees. They seize, and they go into sudden cardiac arrest in the corner of the tent while the nurse is bandaging a sprained ankle.
And no one notices until it's too late.
The trauma-based triage system completely missed the lethal threat because there was no visible bullet hole.
You have just perfectly illustrated the mass gathering triage gap.
Okay, mass gathering triage gap.
The medical specialty of mass gathering medicine, MGM, is fundamentally different from disaster medicine. At a mass gathering, you are dealing with an incredibly high patient presentation rate.
PPR.
Yes, the sheer volume of people showing up at the tent is unlike anything a normal hospital sees. You have massive variance in acuity, meaning the severity of the illnesses ranges from a paper cut to a full cardiac arrest.
Right.
And crucially, a massive percentage of the cases are driven by complex drug and alcohol pharmacology or prolonged environmental exposure like severe heat stroke or hypothermia.
Yeah.
Trauma systems simply cannot process that accurately.
And beyond the danger to the individual patient, there is a massive logistical flaw with using these disaster tags. It creates what the researchers call over-triage.
Over-triage is the silent killer of the surrounding community's health infrastructure.
Oh.
Well, a military disaster triage tool is designed to err on the side of extreme caution. If someone looks even remotely unwell, the system dictates they be flagged as a high priority, loaded into an ambulance, and transported to the nearest definitive care facility.
The hospital.
Right. If you apply that logic to a massive music festival, you end up needlessly transporting hundreds of people.
Oh, I see.
You drain every available municipal ambulance in the county, and you completely overwhelm the local city hospital's emergency room with patients who, honestly, just needed some IV fluids, a dark, quiet place to sleep off an intoxicant, and a sandwich.
It collapses the local healthcare grid for the people who actually live in the town.
Exactly.
And there is another highly bureaucratic problem with the old trauma system. It fails to document the vast majority of the actual physical work the medical team is doing inside the tent.
This is a huge issue for the sustainability of these medical teams. Imagine a medical tent at a 3-day festival. The team might treat 500 people, but 450 of those people don't have traumatic injuries. They have massive blisters from dancing in new boots. They need earplugs because their eardrums are ringing.
They need basic first aid.
Right, they need an ice pack or sunscreen or over-the-counter Tylenol for a headache. The traditional disaster systems only have triage codes for emergent, urgent, and minor injury.
And sunscreen isn't an injury.
Exactly. Giving someone sunscreen doesn't qualify as a minor injury. So all of that vital dispensary work goes entirely undocumented in the official logs.
Which means when the event organizers review the budget the following year, they look at the logs and say, well, the medical tent only saw 50 real patients last year. We are cutting your funding, slashing your staff in half, and putting the medical tent further away to make room for a beer garden.
Which is a terrifying prospect for the medical director.
To solve this massive gap, 2 researchers, Turris and Lund at the University of British Columbia, developed a brand new, bespoke system explicitly engineered for mass gatherings.
Yes, it is called the UBC MGM TISDAS.
It sounds like alphabet soup. Break down the concept for us. What is TS and DUS?
It stands for the Triage Acuity Scale and the Discharge Acuity Scale. What they did was brilliantly synthesize the two existing worlds.
How did they do that?
They took the simple, rapid, color-coded tags of the disaster system, black for deceased, red for immediate life threat, yellow for delayed, green for minor, and they blended it with the deep, complex nuance of the Canadian Triage Acuity Scale.
Which is what?
It's the system used in highly advanced hospital emergency rooms.
But the real innovation is the modifiers they added, right? They specifically built in modifiers for mechanism of injury and, crucially, recreational drugs and alcohol.
That addition completely changes the game. It solves the exact synthetic drug scenario we just discussed.
How does it fix it?
Under the new task-day system, the triage nurse isn't just looking at the heart rate. They factor in the potential trajectory of the ingested substance.
Because they know what the drug is going to do.
Right. Even if the patient's vitals are perfectly fine at that exact second, the system allows the nurse to prioritize them as a high-risk monitor case purely based on the drug ingestion.
Ensuring they don't crash unnoticed in the corner.
Exactly.
They also added a fifth color to the traditional disaster tags, the white tag.
The white tag is revolutionary for mass gathering medicine. It represents the dispensary category.
Ah, so this is for the sunscreen.
Yes. It captures every single one of those minor preventative interventions. Sunscreen, Band-Aids, bug spray, a bottle of water.
Why is that so important to track?
Because suddenly, the medical team has a hard, trackable metric. They can prove the immense volume of preventative care they are providing and demonstrate how that specific care kept 400 people from needing an ambulance later in the day.
But the absolute brilliance of this system is in the name itself. TADES versus DAS. They aren't just logging how the patient looks when they arrive. They are tracking the triage acuity scale, how sick they were when they stumbled into the tent against the discharge acuity scale, how sick they were when they finally left the tent.
That's the delta.
Why is tracking that difference, that delta, so vital?
Because tracking that difference is the only way to prove the actual value of the interventions the on-site medical team performed.
Give me an example of how that works in practice.
Let me paint a picture of why this matters. Let's say event security radios in a frantic call. We have a collapsed, completely unconscious patient deep in the crowd.
Okay, that sounds really bad.
It does. That report automatically generates a massive TS, a maximum triage score. A medical response team sprints out there with a stretcher, fighting through the crowd.
Right.
But when they arrive and assess the patient, they realize the person isn't in cardiac arrest or a diabetic coma. They're just heavily intoxicated and fell deeply asleep in the grass.
Which happens constantly at these events.
Constantly. So the medical team brings them back to the tent, puts them on a cot, monitors their airway, and simply lets them sleep it off for 4 hours. The patient wakes up, drinks a Gatorade, and walks out completely fine.
And what score does that get?
That generates a very low DAS, a low discharge score.
High arrival severity, low departure severity.
Right. But it happens in the exact opposite direction, too.
How so?
Imagine a different patient casually walks up to the front desk of the medical tent and says, "Hey, I just got stung by a bee near the food trucks. Do you have any Benadryl?"
Okay, very minor.
That generates a very low TAS, a simple white dispensary code. But 2 minutes later, while sitting on a chair, their throat begins to rapidly swell shut. They drop into full anaphylactic shock.
Oh, wow.
The medical team has to crash the patient, administer intramuscular epinephrine, start an IV, manage their airway, and call for an emergency helicopter evacuation.
And the score for that?
That results in a maximum DAS, a critical discharge score.
So by tracking both numbers, the medical team is essentially telling a story with the data.
Exactly.
They are definitively proving, look, we took these highly critical situations and downgraded them through our interventions, saving the local hospital. And we successfully caught these seemingly minor issues that suddenly escalated into life or death emergencies.
It provides the undeniable, hard data needed to justify their existence, secure future funding, and ensure the safety of the superorganism.
It is the evolution from simply soaring the wounded to actively managing the risk profile of the entire event.
Exactly. It's a total game changer.
Okay, we have talked about the brilliant adaptations to manage drunk teenagers, bee stings, and dehydration. But we cannot have a complete conversation about mass gatherings without looking at the darkest reality.
No, we can't.
Because the sheer density of a massive crowd makes it an incredibly vulnerable, highly attractive target.
It is the most sobering aspect of this field. Mass gatherings are inherently, fundamentally vulnerable to becoming mass casualty incidents.
Yeah.
The literature and the history of the past decade highlight this tragic reality repeatedly. We are talking about horrific, uncontrollable events.
Like what?
Well, the 2015 Hajj stampede in Mina, for example, where two massive waves of pilgrims collided at a physical intersection, resulting in a crush that left over 700 people dead.
Just awful.
The massive construction crane collapsed at the Grand Mosque during a storm that same year. And, horrifyingly, the rise of intentional, targeted violence.
Right.
The mass shootings and coordinated terrorist attacks, specifically targeting the dense crowds at music festivals in Las Vegas, the Bataclan in Paris, and the Arena in Manchester.
In those absolute worst-case scenarios, the entire paradigm of the medical response has to shift instantly. And the absolute nightmare scenario that the public health agencies plan for is an event involving CBRN agents.
Yes, CBRN.
Chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons released into a compressed crowd. If that happens, triage isn't just about figuring out who needs an ambulance first. It becomes a desperate, absolute necessity for the survival of the medical system itself.
Yes. If a chemical agent like sarin gas or a biological aerosol is deployed into a tightly packed crowd of 100,000 people, the rules of triage we just discussed are immediately suspended.
You throw TS and DAS at the window.
Exactly. It is no longer about checking heart rates or looking for lacerations. The overriding priority becomes large-scale decontamination. Medical providers must instantly pivot to understanding the specific routes of entry for the chemical.
Like, is it inhaled or is it absorbing through the skin?
Right.
Because if they don't, the victims become weapons themselves.
Exactly. This requires hyper-rapid sorting at a perimeter far away from the actual medical tent.
Why far away?
Because if a panicked, chemically contaminated victim rushes directly into the main field hospital seeking help, they instantly contaminate the doctors, the triage nurses, and the entire facility.
Oh, man. So the hospital goes down.
The medical response would collapse from within minutes. The logistics required to manage a CBRN triage perimeter, complete with mass washdown stations and specialized protective gear for the providers, while a crowd of 100,000 people is actively fleeing in terror.
It's unimaginable.
It is a logistical puzzle of almost unfathomable complexity.
It is terrifying to think about, but it is precisely why these specialized systems, like the syndromic surveillance networks and the advanced mass casualty triage protocols, are constantly being drilled, refined, and funded by global health authorities.
The preparation absolutely have to match the unprecedented scale of the gathering.
It is an ongoing arms race against both biological evolution and human tragedy.
Well said.
So to bring all of these threads together, the next time you look at footage of a massive crowd or find yourself standing inside one, you need to realize you are not just looking at a lot of people.
You really aren't.
You are looking at a highly complex, temporary superorganism. Psychologically, it possesses a collective brain capable of immense mutual support, trust, and resilience.
A behavioral shield.
Right, a behavioral shield that can self-organize to avert a fatal crush even when the authorities completely lose control of the perimeter.
Like in Brighton.
Exactly. And biologically, it is an incredibly potent mixing bowl. It's a massive vector capable of accelerating invincible superbugs in a holy river or distributing novel respiratory viruses to 180 countries in a single week.
Which requires an invisible global dragnet of electronic surveillance to keep it in check.
And logistically, it is a volatile environment requiring bespoke, highly evolved triage systems to manage the inevitable chaos of thousands of bodies breaking, crashing, and needing repair.
All while trying to protect the surrounding community's health infrastructure from totally collapsing under the weight of the swarm.
It entirely reframes what it means to be a single participant in a massive collective.
It really does.
Yeah.
But, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, looking toward the future.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
We spent this entire time dissecting the psychology, the biology, and the medical logistics required to manage the immense physical risks of bringing millions of human bodies into one shared geographic space.
Right. We are building incredible systems to manage the danger.
But technology is evolving rapidly. As virtual reality, spatial computing, and digital presence become increasingly sophisticated and indistinguishable from physical reality, we have to ask a profound question.
What's that?
Will the mass gatherings of the future even happen in physical space?
Oh, wow. That is a massive paradigm shift.
Think about it. If we eventually move the Kumbh Mela, the Olympics, or the next massive global music festival entirely into the metaverse.
Specifically as a public health strategy, you mean?
Yes. to eliminate the risks of infectious disease, the terror of stampedes, and the threat of targeted violence. If we do that, what happens to us as a species?
That's a great point.
What happens to that collective resilience we discussed? What happens to that spontaneous immune system where a stranger catches you when you fall, and that shared human identity?
Right, because you aren't physically there to catch anyone.
The psychological research strongly suggests that this profound unity only forms when we share the same physical air, face the same physical risks, and are anchored in the exact same physical reality. If we sanitize the gathering by removing the physical danger entirely, do we also accidentally strip away the profound, vulnerable human connection that makes a mass gathering so powerful and transformative in the first place?
That is an incredible question and a slightly haunting note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden world of mass gatherings. We genuinely hope this has completely altered your perspective.
I hope so too.
The next time you find yourself shoulder to shoulder in a sea of humanity, feeling the air vibrate with the bass, or walking slowly in a massive procession under the sun, remember the pop-up superorganism you are actively a part of.
Notice the invisible psychological bonds of the people around you keeping you safe.
Consider the microscopic biological exchange happening in the air you are breathing, and spare a thought for the incredibly complex, unseen medical logistics standing by just outside the perimeter, ready to sort the chaos. Until next time, stay curious.